As many of you know, My Hero Academia will be ending this year or the next. It's doing at its absolute best it's ever done sales-wise. The anime performs fine in Japan, and more spin-off content keeps getting produced, so why am I not satisfied? A lot of you have continually asked me for my thoughts on how MHA as a series is currently doing, so strap in because we're going to get into not just my thoughts on the manga, but the anime, spin-off material, and series as a whole. Please do note that this will have manga spoilers up to recent times, so around chapter 350. MHA as a series is one that thrived based on its potential. If a character or plotline didn't get a satisfying continuation or conclusion, you could rest assured that in the far future, whatever you were concerned about would get taken care of. Act 2 Horikoshi was known as the guy who never wasted a panel, and everything served a greater purpose to the narrative. That is, until the final act came about. With the announcement that MHA is in its endgame now, came with it an underlying sense of disappointment. Act 2 of the story as a whole is one that at some point begins to greatly expand its field of focus. Act 1 was about Midoriya and the close circle around him, whereas Act 2 opens up to be about people like the Todoroki family, the generational conflict of One for all of the villains individually, and ideological conflict. Now of course, it's not a bad thing to expand its scope like this, but it is ambitious. MHA, in a sense, might have bit off more than it could chew, going deep into characters like Endeavor, Shigaraki, or Toya Todoroki, while neglecting what a lot of people started reading for. Is this a problem for me personally? No, I love Act 2 of MHA overall, and the amount of depth that it brought to the story, but I can't ignore what it did to the core of the series. If you're a part of this fandom since pre-war, you would remember the constant complaints about how Midoriya has basically taken a backseat in his own story. This fact can be felt quite strongly in the third act, as some aspects of the series feel quite underdeveloped, Midoriya included. What he suffered from was something similar to the game dev term of feature creep, meaning a project which wildly increases its scope during development beyond the original plans. What was now felt was the opportunity cost of that feature creep, or the loss of potential gain for selecting another next best alternative. This is something that would be easily rectifiable via just more to the series, but then, chapter 306, the final act begins. Of course, this wasn't great news. We all love My Hero Academia and wanted to see it continue to succeed, and if the third act was anything like the second one, then it can go on and on for upwards of 5 years of real time. Oh. The series has a single year left at best. What does this mean for the plotlines like the Shirakumo story? What about the story of Hawks after he was taken in by the Hero Public Safety Commission? What about Spinner's entire character of finding a place to belong and growing into Shigaraki's right-hand man? What about anything about the Harima family? And Mr. Compress's big reveal? How do we pick up the pieces of this heavily broken and decimated society in just under a year of story? What about things like Midoriya's dad, who Horikoshi said he would introduce years ago? We have seen what this lack of breathing room has given us, with hastily tied up after hastily tied up plot points to get us to the finish line. The UA Trader plotline spawning out of nowhere and immediately being resolved. The conflict between the first and second users of One for All being resolved in a couple of pages. Deku speedrunning his quirk unlocks. The pretty unsatisfying conclusion of Hawks and Best Genius moment. The coveted Stain return amounting to him inspiring All Might and turning to dust. Shinso and Monoma's final act moments, and so much more. Gone are the days of hoping to see cool and interesting deep dives into very nuanced topics of discussion, such as quirk discrimination or the flaws of Hero Society as a whole, or the Hero Public Safety Commission, but they instead remain on the side as set dressing, never to be nearly as deep or interesting as we thought, forever becoming a very shallow puddle on the sidewalk. Something that is particularly disappointing to me is the sliver of time we get to spend with Shigaraki as a fully realized, independent, and competent villain. Now this could be resolved, but he gets to work his magic in the war arc before he is completely body snatched by All for One and we're robbed of one of the greatest characters of the series. Midoriya Izuku, our main character, arguably suffers from this the most, as his progression throughout the series was somewhat minor, and the arc meant to address aspects of his character, like the effects of his bullying and his potentially negative relationship with the power of One for All, came out largely uncooked and rushed. The final act flanderized him to keep the plot moving, to make him the ultimate paragon of empathy that can forgive and forget, like with Bakugo's apology or Aoyama's traitor reveal, all hastily tied up and without any of Midoriya's input, just so we can act as that beacon of empathy and also we can get to the final conflict. The speed really makes you sit back and think, huh, the last time we see these things on screen is probably the last of these topics we'll ever get, which is an incredibly disappointing thought to have, as I believe MHA was dripping with potential. The rush to the finale has also made MHA's second climax, the Paranormal Liberation War, grow to feel like it lacks any personal consequences. With how much of a shakeup we saw from the series' first climax, the Kamino arc, with reflections on not only the effects on society, which PLW also has, but personal, interpersonal, and character-related consequences. The massive implications of the Hawks vs. Dabi scene with Dark Shadow's dialogue stating that Hawks' back was quite literally missing in the end amounted to very little, as his wings should start regrowing, albeit slower, and he's mobile enough for the final fight it seems. The complete disregard of his safety and overuse of his arms ended up affecting affecting Deku? Not at all, because his body has adapted to One for All better, which in itself is an acceptable explanation. The problem comes, however, with chapters like 285, which set up greater consequences which the narrative does not follow up on. Don't even get me started on how the narrative has treated Twice's death, which has seemingly little in-universe reaction as of writing. To further drive home the point about lack of personal consequences, the reveal that Endeavor is a terrible abuser clearly has an impact societally, but it in no ways affects Endeavor as a character besides making him cry a little bit in the hospital. Absolutely nobody looks at him sideways due to this reveal, and there isn't a single second of thought. Much like Midoriya, character reaction has almost all been boiled down to hive minds and vehicles for empathy to push us as fast as we can into the final battle. Something that seems insane to me is how One for All was this closely kept secret for all 300 plus chapters of the story, until it's just sort of common knowledge now that Deku has the same crystalline network of power used by the most famous hero in history, and nobody actually cared. Not even Endeavor, who spent his entire life chasing after a power that would infinitely grow further and further beyond him. Endeavor does not even get a single scene where he gets to think about how pointless it all was. You'll see videos from people like Forever World and Chibi talking about how instances from the past prove that Horikoshi is rushing to the end, but those events are completely unrelated, and I will talk about them later. If you want evidence that Horikoshi is rushing MHA, just look at the absolute botching of plotlines and extraordinarily fast pacing. Villain hunt and everything pre-Final War, despite what people would like to say, is hilariously uncharacteristic of the series as a whole. Of course, this isn't explicit proof that Horikoshi is rushing the series. Perhaps this really is just his vision for the series as a whole. Your guess is as good as mine. It's all speculation at the end of the day, and none of the anime YouTubers, myself included, know any better. Another reason besides pacing that I believe, and I specified that this is just speculation, that MHA will never meet the potential it always had, is pressure from the magazine. What a lot of people in very invested fandoms of the series enjoy is villain content, or more specifically, content that shines a lot on the darker aspects of hero society and in a lot of ways also acts as a criticism of Japanese society, with stuff like the concept of defilement through toga or LGBT discrimination, the aspects of bystander effect, the soul-crushing work culture, and much, much more. Invested fans love this type of content because, at least in my opinion, it is much more thematically interesting and appeals to somebody who is doing more than just cracking open a magazine every week. I plan on making an entire video about villain perception in the Japanese fandom, so subscribe if you're interested in that. But the Cliff Notes version is that, more than anything, Horikoshi is limited by the magazine itself. To the unfamiliar, the series is printed and released every week in the Weekly Shonen Jump magazine, the best-selling manga magazine in Japan. And with every single magazine purchased, there will also be a little postcard alongside it that contains a survey for the readers. For Weekly Shonen Jump in particular, you are asked to rank which 3 manga are your favorites for that particular week, and those surveys are used to determine which stories remain in the magazine. Stories that rank too low for too long of a period of time will get the famous Weekly Shonen Jump axe. Now, I have absolutely nothing to substantiate this following claim, so this is wild speculation. But if we are to assume that the people reading the magazine weekly are much more casual fans, as opposed to somebody invested enough to purchase merchandise such as manga volumes, we can see the fundamental problem with this system in terms of story investment. Story arcs like the Forest Training Camp that were pretty much more ambitious initially, but massively trimmed down and led to the ending of Act 1 prematurely, solely due to reader surveys. Or you could take the mixed reception of MVA on a weekly magazine basis, or, even better, the entire removal of Lady Nagant's entire volume of backstory, which is a little known fact in this fandom surprisingly. She had much more left to do in the story. If we want to take it a step further, and again, please do not accept this as fact, weekly reader surveys and the series' success could just be responsible for the state of the series as it currently stands. Its rapidly accelerated pacing could be due to the success of stuff like Jujutsu Kaisen, in which the pacing is notoriously extremely fast for some people. Perhaps series like that are just performing really well in the reader surveys. The shying away from nuanced handling of its subject matter such as trauma could also be a form of catering to a more casual audience that wants to read a simple story about the Deku who always does his best. If this ends up being true, then it's not that MHA is missed potential, it's that MHA was never allowed to reach its potential. Before I jump into stuff like the anime, I'd like to ultimately recap my thoughts on the manga in 2022. It's not great. Villain Hunt and the mini arcs after it have honestly been my least favorite arcs in the series for myself personally, and the war is struggling to hold my investment. The stuff going on with Dabi being the exception because, as usual, he is delivering us some top-tier My Hero Academia content. I don't think the manga is doomed, just so we're clear. I think the plot conclusions that are on their way can actually be fairly interesting, with more extrapolation on Toya and the Todo fam, Ochako and Toga, and last but not least, Deku and Shigaraki. My criticism of Act 3 does not take away my love for the series and excitement to see how these plotlines might end. The anime for MHA in 2022 is in quite an interesting state. As of uploading, Season 6 is not out yet, so we haven't seen the adaptation quality of the War Arc or a Villain Hunt, but from where I stand now, I think it'll be safe to say it'll just be okay. We have seen a slow but still noticeable degradation of quality for the anime, starting with Core 2 of Season 3, and coming to pretty much a climax for Season 5's second core, which is honestly the worst the anime has ever looked. Season 5 is also the first season of the series lacking that holy shit moment, or a moment that leaves you in awe. You know, Season 1 had USJ Nomu versus All Might, Season 2 had Deku versus Todoroki in the Stain fight, Season 3 had Muscular and All Might's final fight, Season 4 had Infinite 100% in the Endeavor fight, and Season 5 had a joint training match for some reason. I plan on making a video on my predictions for Season 6 as a whole, but here is how I see Season 6 going in terms of production. If we use Season 5 as a baseline, which might be hard to do since we don't know the effect that COVID will be having on Season 6, we can come to the conclusion that the war arc will be done above average. It will have some great moments with a possibly slightly wonky adaptation much like the similarly length Overhaul arc, and Core 2, or Villain Hunt, will probably be an absolute disaster, harkening back to the still frame galore and horrible shots from Endeavor Agency and My Villain Academia in Season 5. The anime is suffering from the consistently in-production curse. People want to do more ambitious shots like some of the fights we've talked about in the past, but time and scheduling ends up catching up to them, making it so they can't really do anything out there and exciting. As an animator, if all your fun and cool cuts are constantly being scaled back, well, why would you ever want to work on the anime? This is why kind of early on a lot of the talent bled into the MHA movies, if I recall, because it just allows you to do much more ambitious and exciting stuff. As more and more people feel disinterested in working on the anime, things will only get worse for My Hero Academia's adaptation, unless something is done by the production company about this terrible schedule the staff has to work with. Allow them more time to work, and we will see quality reminiscent of stuff from Seasons 2 and 3. The staff over at Studio Bones really are working with what they've got, and it's not their decision at the end of the day how well a season is adapted. We can only hope that Season 5's quality shows the people in charge that the staff needs more time to work, and hopefully COVID isn't affecting the production cycle as badly as it was before. Jumping on a quick aside for the movies themselves, yeah, they're awful. Even during Act 2 when I was My Hero Academia's biggest ride or die supporter, I never really enjoyed these. They are canon-breaking and terribly uninteresting films that are shot out to make a quick buck off of the My Hero Academia brand. If you enjoy the action in them, that's great. I just wish they would stop existing and that I would never have to think about this atrocity of a scene again. Sure, Two Heroes is slightly more interesting than the rest, but it's like being a golden trash bag in a pile of garbage. In a world where canon films such as Jujutsu Kaisen Zero and Demon Slayer, Infinity Train are making absolute assloads of money, I would rather them adapt something like the Villain Hunt arc as the next movie so that it doesn't get absolutely shafted by its adaptation quality, because there is no way the contents are going to carry it. The other spin-off material such as Vigilantes and team-up missions also seem equally uninteresting to me. Pretty much the only good part of the series is the primary manga itself. Vigilantes does seem that it's coming to its natural conclusion though, which is interesting, and hopefully there is no more crossover in the main series because we don't need it negatively impacting MHA more than it already has. To summarize, in my opinion the state of MHA is not a great one. The manga is rapidly losing my interest just about as fast as it's paced, the anime is slated for disappointment, and we're sitting in wait for Toho or Shueisha to beat the dying horse known as the MHA brand to print more and more money as the series comes to its conclusion. Contrary to what some people might believe, it does not make me happy to be this harsh to MHA. It was my favorite series for a long time, only recently being overtaken by Re:Zero. I am this harsh because I know it can be and want it to be better. This isn't a move for clout or views, it is a fan's genuine disappointment towards one of his favorite stories of all time. Thank you for watching, everyone. A lot of people asked me to make this kind of video, so I thought I would just post one real quick. If you like this video, remember to please like, comment, and subscribe. You can also go to the description below and you can follow my Twitter. I post nothing but bangers, never been aired, never been ratioed. And you can also go to my Discord down below where we talk about series like My Hero Academia, Re:Zero, Jujutsu Kaisen, etc, etc. And also I'm starting this thing where I stream maybe once a week. I will be streaming this Saturday. If you guys like the last stream, please do make sure to tune in. That's about it. See ya.